Oi, Posh. I don't know whether we're Posh or not, but I might as well stay a bit. Some white cars. Oh, there you are. I can see you. Hey! There's a load on the streets of London. Excellent. Cool, it working. Hey, I might be getting Posh. We might be getting Posh, guys. I'm telling you. Look at us this game. We're rocking. So, what a week we've had this week. They're all gone absolute nuts. Have they not? I mean, good God. I mean, it's like watching Play School, isn't it? It's like watching Play School all over again through the round window. All right, everybody. Everybody groovy. Everybody good. Yeah, it's another Sunday. My God, they come round quick. I'll tell you that. Hey, I haven't got time. I never have time to do now. Turn your mic up. No problem. How's that? Is that a little bit better? How's that? A bit quiet still. Is that not a bit better? Okay, well, we can get it right up there. Is that better? Still low. Okay, well, how's that? Is that better? Still very quiet. Still very quiet. Oh, I don't know why that's doing that. Unless... Has that changed things any? How's that? Better. Excellent. Super duper. So now I know what that's for, because it doesn't actually seem to do anything. So, yeah, of course, bear with me, because we are learning about all this stuff. So I just thought I'd try something there with a bit of the old noise instead of staring at my face while I sit there and go, waiting for people to come. So there we go. Sound good, groovy. So I don't know how many's on. I can't see from this platform, which is a bit odd. God, we're still using shitloads of CPU. Why? We haven't got two running again, have we? How's the quality? Because I know last week it weren't very good through this OBS, but we were doing 2 live streams, so good, that's super, but it's still using a hell of a lot of CPU. Why is it doing that? Anyway, not to worry. So let me see if I can get this right now. So all the lunatics have been out all week screaming down war. You've got Boris at Chalker, Westminster, bigging himself up, chest out. Doesn't look good because his belly is way bigger than his chesticles. So it doesn't look very, you know, ape-like. It doesn't suit him actually. And I don't think we have a big enough army actually to go and kick shit out of Russia. So I don't think we should be doing that, in my opinion. So, of course, you've got the trumpet. He's come out and he's gone apeshit as usual, and he's saying... So the trumpet is saying... we should put Beijing... We should put flags on, basically, of Beijing and start a war between them and Moscow by putting Chinese flags on American fighter jets to bomb the shit out of Russia to distract Putin from invasion of Ukraine. And then we can all sit back and watch Russia and China have it. So Trumpet killed it. He's blown the best strategy that the primary school children at Westminster and in Washington were coming up with. That's what they were coming up with, and Trump has just blown it out of the water. So, I mean, the guy's a complete fruit bat, isn't he not? So, I don't know what are we supposed to make of that, because the guy is just a tad crazy. Now then, I have to do something here to, how do I, so I have to change something here to get stuck into what we want to start rattling on about. Actually, we don't just yet. So, Trump's kicking it all off and he wants it all out everywhere. Let's really have it. And all these sanctions are insane, because you know what? They're going to hurt us far more than they're going to hurt anybody else. And let's look at the platform they're just setting up here. So now they've given themselves license to cut energy, cut fuel. Yeah, you're looking now at this transforming into the wind and rain house arrests, aren't you? You know, they're going to start limiting what's on the highway, i.e. you can't afford the juice, you can't afford the insurance, etc., etc. That's coming. So, you know, it's going to become a case where your horse is costing you way too much and you're going to have to get back to buses and them taxis that never arrive, apparently. So I don't know what's going on there. But they do seem to be doing a lot in relation to transport on top of this nonsense. I mean, this camera system they've got up is just ridiculous. You know, as I've said, we need to get in his head. So at some point down the line, it's going to be a great way to completely demolish that and just take your registration plate off your property, because that's the tie to your VIN number, and that's why they hold the title that they claim we own your property. And then you get to sign a contract which gives you V5 where you say, yes you do, I'm happy to be the keeper. So if you're spending 60, 80, 100 grand on a motor, it's not yours. Yeah. What's fair about that? Is that England? No, it's not. There's nothing fair about that at all. So, Putin. Last week and through this week, all you get is images of exactly the kind of warfare that NATO carries out, which is bomb, blow it up, kill everything. Yeah? Flashes, lights, blah, blah, blah. Well, you know, the reason why that narrative's come to a crashing halt is because that's not the way the Ruskies do battle. He's using siege strategy, whereby he basically surrounds a quantified area. In this case, it was pulling it's like 30,000 or 40,000 Ukrainian troops that were already around the Donbass area, because that's where they've been causing all the trouble. Hence the reason, according to Putin, he's gone in and basically just slowly encircled them and got them in what he calls, or their strategy they call, a cauldron. Because as it gets closer, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter. Now, interestingly, this strategy is exactly what they used in Syria. It's also what they used in Chechen, and it's actually a format that the Russians have used in warfare for a very long time. But what he basically did in Syria was he would encircle the only people that would be being shot at or attacked would be those that were attacking the forces carrying out this strategy. Now, of course, in the Ukraine, the majority of the forces fighting are actually the militias from the Donbass. So the majority of fighting that's actually going on in the east of Ukraine has been carried out by the Donbass population themselves, the militias, etc., that have been set up over the last 8 years as they've had to do battle with this political government, of course, that we can't be spoken about in the Ukraine, attacking what are basically Russians in the eastern, southeastern side of the Ukraine, as it were. So he's encircled all these troops now. They're stuck. They've got two options, haven't they? They either go out in a blaze of glory and get annihilated, which is an absolute, that, you know, there's no doubt that's going to happen, or with the ceasefire, and as he did in Syria, he offers out a safe path for civilians and to leave. But also what he ends up doing as well is he will allow the combatants to leave too. Perhaps he's going to let them go to Kiev, but obviously they have to give up their arms, etc., etc. And it worked a treat in Syria. Of course, then he sent all the ISIS forces up into Idlib. I wrote a few reports about that because that was being run by a British, not English, British military or ex-military high ranker, and there were some very odd things going on there, indeed. So this is why the narrative that's been put out by the West of all this bombing and blah blah is just so garbage, because that's not what's been happening at all. You know, there is a chance that they could up the ante now, especially if they go for this no-fly zone, because of course somebody's going to have to police it. and that's basically it's where you're going to start seeing the bigger forces coming in and doing battle with Russia, and that can't be good. That's ridiculous. So these primary school children are so desperate to get this war hot. It's ridiculous. And the way they're doing that is through the media, just by bombarding everybody with absolute garbage and nonsense. And of course, so many people are falling for it because it's all over the social media. They're backing. They haven't even got. I mean, most people don't even know where Ukraine is, let alone any of its history or of its political situation, especially as of the last 8 years, 2014, which is when this puppet government being run by the Prime Minister, who is actually an actor and a very good comedian, it would appear, who... I mean, you can see the nonsense of this priest that they've used him even, because he never expected anything like this. He did a film or a documentary, like a show, a bit like you get on Netflix, about a school teacher who made a speech, got all the country on him, and he ended up becoming president. And here he is, the man now is president, and it's quite a joke, really. But that seems to be what's going down. He's a national of the place that you can never speak of, so you can pretty much guess who's pulling his strings and actually who put him there in the first place. The picture's not as good, is it not? Okay, well, I'm sure at some point I may be able to get it better. But if I can't, I'll just go back to YouTube and just go back to the simple way, as it were, and we can do it like that. So here we go. I just want to save. So I'm just trying to go through. There's a way that you do this. And I've not done it yet, right? So I'm not doing it right. So I'm doing so. Oh, there we go. Right, here we go. So it should. So why is it not? Okay, I'm having a bit of problem here. Just getting this out. Okay, this is a bit rubbish. So why is that not doing that? So I don't think I thought I'd got this pretty wrapped up how I'm going to use it, but it doesn't look like I've got it just right. No, I've not got this right at all. I'm actually trying to change URL to put us into another sort of thing, so that I'm hitting that now. That should come up, but it's not coming up for some reason. Well, that's rubbish. Here we go. So why is that? Wait a minute. I think I might have to do this. I'm getting it. Now I'm getting it. Sorry about this, chaps. I suppose if I can get this right, it will actually make our talks a little bit better. Just taking a bit. They're hard to find in you bloody. Oh, I'm not doing well here. I'm really not doing well. So I think that's what I've not done. I haven't brought it up into the browser, so obviously it's not going to come in. Should let it further away. So that can go. Well, I'm not really doing right well. Here we go. So if I go back to this, now then, think. Might have it. So it's a bit hard to read, isn't it? It was bigger than that before. I bet you can't read that, can you guys? Maybe if I do it like that, is that a bit better? Right, so this is incel. I'll read it anyway. So when I was past this, I had a look at it and I thought, it looks a bit weird and interesting. But when I was given this information, what I was told was that this is more of a system, a method that they use, and they used it against the IRA, and they used it and still use it against Islamic terrorists that are here. So now it's shifted into something called incel, which is an abbreviation of involuntary celibate. Okay, are you believing that an involuntary celibate? She said, is a member of an online subculture of people who define themselves as unable to get a romantic or sexual partner despite desiring one. Discussions in incel forums are often characterised by resentment and hatred, misogyny, misanthropy, self-pity and self-loathing, racism, a sense of entitlement to sex, and the endorsement of violence against women and sexually active people. So, I mean, that's just pretty much, it's ridiculous, really. But if you think about it, and you go on with this nonsense, this keep the streets safe for all this no woman is safe malarkey. So they're going to be looking for people, they're profiling people that they deem that are single males now, it's white males now that they're going on, to see if they can pass you off in this category. And, well, who knows what they can do when they get you into this sort of category side of thing. It says the American Southern Poverty Law Center described the subculture as part of the online male supremacist ecosystem. I mean, what kind of babble's that? That is included in their list of hate groups. Incels are mostly male and heterosexual, and are often white. Estimates of the overall size of the subculture vary greatly, ranging from thousands to hundreds of thousands of individuals. At least 8 mass murders, resulting in a total of 61 deaths, have been committed since 2014 by men who have either self-identified as incels or who had mentioned incel-related names and writings in their private writings or internet postings. Incel communities have been criticised by researchers and the media for being misogynistic, encouraging violence, spreading extremist views and radicalising their members. Beginning in 2018, the incel ideology has increasingly been described as a terrorism threat. And in February 2020, attacking Toronto, Canada, became the first instance of allegedly incel-related violence to be prosecuted as an act of terrorism. So you're looking at this and you can think, well, what the hell's it got to do with anybody if a guy has been divorced and he's not out there looking for it because he's either a fat slob, a pisshead? You know what I'm saying? What business is it? So they're suggesting anybody now that's not hooked up or is desperate. So they're probably gathering that from your Facebook, you know, your browser use and such. That's quite interesting because that could very, you know, the porn thing, if you're on porn all the time, you could be flagged up and come part of this watch, you know, you're being sort of prescribed this label. So it's quite worrying, and now they've tied it now to terrorism. So if they can label you in this respect, you're on your way to being labelled a terrorist. Now, not the last time I were in a cell, but the time before I asked for the codes, and I read them. And, you know, it's all fair until you're labelled a terrorist, and then you've basically got no rights whatsoever. You don't even, you can be whisked off, nobody knows where you are, There's no briefs informed. Nothing gets. Nobody has a clue where you've gone, basically. Yeah. So you could be in a snuff movie, in somebody's cellar in Burnley, even, you know, or anywhere really. So that's interesting, especially as we've just looked into some. We're looking into something at the moment that's quite worrying in relation to now that hotels have sort of lost their mojo in relation to how it's been for years and years and years. You know, people using hotels for whatever. You know, people are working from home; they don't need hotels, etc. It's had a huge, it's made a huge impact on hotellery, and so what we're looking into at the moment, and the actual knowledge of this isn't actually new, but given the situation we're in now, is that a lot of these hotels now are going bum. So they're either being sold or they're being approached to be used in a certain way. Now, what they seem to be using is the idea of a homeless, sort of an immediate homeless kind of situation where people can go. But when you look into it, especially the ones we're looking at the moment, then they have a history of being trafficking organisations hiring these hotels. They corrupt the staff to the point that the staff keep quiet, and because they're getting money or they're getting whatever it is. You know, back to the old Venetian idea that find out what they want, make sure you supply it. You know, the more dastardly it is, the more hold you've got on them. But of course, whatever it is that they're supplying, they're going to want the favours. Those favours, each time they're asked, is going to corrupt you ever more. Until eventually you're down at their level. You've done so many favours that have just totally and utterly shown you to be the inverse of what you would probably reckon you were before you started on that path. So, you know, we're seeing this kind of thing now in these hotels that are stricken. They're getting these networks in, or they're just being bought outright and by these networks and being used for such. So I'll not go any further into detail at this point, but that's a very worrying sort of thing, because of course, being that they have the term homeless, they're obviously getting funded by the taxpayers. And this is not just here, this is all over the world. These are being set up everywhere. I mean, you know, these high-rises have gone up in Manchester. You know, last time I looked, there wasn't a single one that were being funded by anybody from these islands. None of them. What are they for? Are they creating their own sort of their own little world within a city, you know, and they just mooch around between these buildings, either underground or helicopters or whatever, so that they're in your area trying to deal with whatever it is they do, whether that's procuring people for whatever, you know, drugs, etc. But they never actually have to mingle with the unclean and the unwashed and the useless eaters, as they call us. So, who knows? But there's definitely some strange things going on that, you know, these cities have to have these high-rises that nobody really knows what the hell's going on in them. You know what I'm saying? They're like military bases in and of themselves, aren't they, really, you know? So there's all sorts of things going on that this nonsense that, you know, people are believing that somehow this is just, oh my God, look what's happened, and that it's not basically what we planned for next year, but because everybody's bent over and annihilated themselves so easily, they've shut this down a year early because it wasn't supposed to end until March next year. Shut it down early, in with the next part of the script. That's what's going on. People can't see that because they're just watching the TV. So, you know, there's so much now being set up as a new platform, a new foundation for a brand new reason for why everything that you all got trained to do in the last 2 years, you're going to do at command. On it's raining, it's snowing, oh, there's a bit of wind, you know, it's like, whoa, you know, this is where it's going, folks. And, you know, these fuels going up, they're just going to start switching power off here, there and everywhere. They've just licensed it themselves, and it is actually all the Fruitbats that have been out all this time in the West. Now, this is another interesting thing I was looking into, who's actually doing these sanctions, as it were, because in a lot of cases, you'd expect it to be UK and the United States. However, when you look at the jolly tables, the biggest sanction so far against Russia is the EU, Germany, who else was it? I can't remember what others were, but UK and USA are right there at bottom. They haven't actually, they've done a lot of gobbing off down at Chalker, Westminster, and Chalker, Washington DC, with that absolute buffoon. I mean, come on, it's just becoming ridiculous that, you know, we're accepting this as these people are leading our nations into absolute shit, basically. But you've got them all papping on nonsense and garbage, throwing these sanctions around, etc. And the biggest voices do appear to be Boris, the blonde bombshell, and Alzheimer boy over there, Mr. Biden. So, yet, the figures, it's the US and the UK not really sanctioning much at all. Obviously, the City of London holds most of the Russian oligarchs' thing, if it can get hold of it. Now, one MP stood up and said, you know, you can't just rob people's assets, you have to compensate them. So they're actually trying to set it up now that they can just rob all their assets. So they've encouraged all these oligarchs here just to rob them, basically, is what it's looking like. Now that's going to piss everybody off. You know what I'm saying? That's a bit shit, that. You've got to remember, in the City of London is the naval and financial centre of the Venetian Empire. On our arse, on our land. And we get sucked into it. I mean, a lot of people are sucked into it. And they're the ones that have had the placebo. Why am I using so much CPU? Don't understand it, but it's going to blow up. The computer might blow up. So what are you lot saying? Manchester had a blackout, I saw there. On slow text. I think it is a bit of a slow do anyway, actually. Picture's not as good as normal. Further, Manchester had a blackout, and I heard we had a brownout in Widnes. Blackout and brown. I know, I mean, it's a game they play. They test it. Because if you consider what they've actually been doing with all our systems is putting them into zones so that a certain area can be just shut off. You know what I mean? It's like if you have a power cut. There's always generally just an area, and then you might have one side of your street that's off, but rest of everybody else isn't. Because you're on two different sort of grids, you know what I mean? You're on a different ring, as it were. And they've been doing a lot of that so that it can actually, really tailor where they want to shut things down and whatever. This is using shitloads of CPU. That's probably why the picture's not very good. Yeah, the camera's crap on these Macs, I'm telling you. It's absolute rubbish. You'd expect a bloody good camera on them. That's not the case. I think what I might do is look to getting a camera down the line and see if we can just always at least put the best quality up we can. Full screen and readable. They are in the front to nature. Oh, well, that's good if you could read it. They're coming for you, Sean. Soz, save our Sean. Who's coming for me? You great lump. What are you talking about? Stop being silly. Look, they told me they were going to shoot me. What? 15 years ago. Please. Via a mason and all. Yeah. So, think I give a shit about that kind of nonsense. That's what kids think. Like, better not do that, I'll get done. I just think, fuck it, I'll do that because I like it. It looks good and it's good. So we'll have none of that malarkey going down. The smart cities, yes. That's going to cause a bit of eruption in this clean air thing that they're cracking on in there. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Can you see what I'm saying about this registration plate? Because not only is it entrapping you on all the nonsense on the highway, but road in their case, you debt, everything. It's your weak point for everything in the world on this statutory policy system on person, especially the Schismogenesis trust with the surname, the birth certificate. But still, the birth certificate is your evidence that you're the beneficiary of it. You've got to get that across. First, you're not being heard because you're dead, and whoever you're dealing with, solicitor is representing because you're dead. So, yeah, but we've done all that stuff. What do I think? Do you think is a placebo? No, there's a lot at the placebo. If you've been good for British Empire, you'll get your placebo. Until they don't need you anymore, and then when they've had enough, the booster will take you. No, this is... I mean, when you get into that stuff, it's been specifically set. There are things they wanted to achieve. They put it all out as an experiment, and then they're gathering the data as they go. In my opinion, they've succeeded so much ahead of their expectations. They've moved this next phase in, which is Putin the rebel. Putin's no rebel. He's just been talking to his rabbi this week. Abad Lubavitch. Same rabbis that were standing around Biden in, summertime when they do this education day sign-off. Here, they've been done forever. We just don't see it. Yeah. They're all being controlled by this one group. And it's all based around this guy called the Rebbe, who was sort of the precursor to the Mashiach, or Messiah, that they're waiting for. E-phases supplies different streets on different phases for load balancing. Yeah, well, it makes sense, doesn't it? You can't have it all just running on one thing. Yeah. It's same with the water as well. They did a lot of stuff on water, and what they were doing, I noted, because I've fit water mains back in the day when I worked at Langs, and they were putting taps on and stops on things so that, again, they can isolate a particular area and maybe give it a different filter. Or, you know what I'm saying? They've been tailoring all our systems so that they can actually react in a particular area. So, I mean, there's something kicking off in one area. They just turn all lights there, all your communications there, a flick of a button, and all the CCTV on. Do you know what I'm saying? And they've had to separate all that system as well, because you can guarantee that no matter what juice shortages we have, these masks that they're putting up everywhere won't be affected, but you're paying for it. So you get lights out, no gas. Well, it's electric in it, but you'll get your lights took out so that these things can still be powered. And they've been doing that all the time, and especially since the beginning of these house arrests. First thing they did with Virgin, flat out put these things in front of everybody's house. What's that all about? And they're using telegraph poles, and then we looked tonight actually, we traced, because they've now put wires up on them. And they're going over it across road. It's like, what? You know, we don't do this here. Only cables we ever saw were on the back streets to service your telephone line. Now we're getting the same thing all over streets. And these cables, they all go back to these little towers that they've been putting up with all these little round transmitters on. Not the big ones, the big monstrous ones, but the ones with the little round transmitters on all over. They're going up everywhere. And they're tied to this Virgin cable. Weird. They might not all be to Virgin. I don't know that for absolutely sure. But Virgin is the one that's put these boxes outside everybody's house during all these house arrest scenarios. So I don't know what the hell's going on. 3-phase. Yeah. Some weird stuff going down everywhere, I'll tell you now. Now then, I have another. So incel, I just thought you need to have a look at that, because this is creepy. Especially, you know, because that means now that in the internet world, there will be 77th Brigade, you know what I mean, and these kind of operations. They'll be looking for people that will fit into that category according to your internet use, of course, because they're not gaining their intelligence from your chit chat outside in the pub. You're gaining their intelligence as to who they think might be this, blah, blah, blah. And they set it up as though it's an existing thing and it's a club, but yet what they're going to do is just, they can now go say, oh, they're part of that because, oh, look at the file. So they're showing these magistrates that they're advertising to come and be a magistrate and you don't need any legal experience. But You know what I'm saying? And so these files are being given to them in the back room before they go into this core, and they just go, terrorists, oh my god, whatever you want to do. You know, this is what they're doing in these star chambers, which is why it's bloody important that people recognise that you're not getting any law. You're not in a King's Court. King's Court's the only one that can issue fine or prison. But of course, if you're going into these star chambers, you've gone in on Schismogenesis Trust, the surname, the birth certificate. Yeah? So that's a, you know, you walk through, they're just not full stop. And that's the no-hide. You know, that's going to shift it into the no-hide, because the no-hide is going to control the golem. You've been decapitated, not physically. You've been decapitated in your standing. Yet you're already dead. But you're still active under that dead trust because others can represent it if you give up your role as beneficiary. So if they're going to decapitate off that again, you're going to be in a position where you're not even going to be represented, as it were. You're just going to stand there alone and get told what it is. Because you've no standing anymore. You've gone below. Slavery. A slave can't contract, can they? You know, a slave cannot contract. So that'd be a decapitation, would it not? You know, the next one after dead trust has got to be a slave. You've no contract, you've no nothing. You are there. So that's slavery. I know, of course, you mentioned that word and everybody has visions of Kunta Kinte. No. You know what I'm saying? That only started in the 10th century. Previous to that, it were the Moors that were slavers, and they had nothing but white honkies in their boudoirs. The images are all there to see. I'm not telling fibs, but facts need to be put on the table, do they not? But slavery isn't a black-white thing. Okay, there were a physical side to it, but we'll not get into that. But when you look at who the slavers were, they weren't the people that would claim to be white. Let me put it that way. Even if they may look it, they wouldn't claim to be it. Yeah. So, you know, there's so much in that people just don't get, which is why they get carried along with the false narrative, and then guilt's being formed and blah blah blah. I mean, I have absolutely zero guilt because I've never held a slave, and if I did in my last life, I'm pretty sure I've made it right, because it's not your job to make it right, is it? You know, we're on our own personal journeys. But I'm not the kind of character I think that wants slaves. You know what I'm saying? So I have no guilt whatsoever, at all, for any of that nonsense that went on back in the day. Because I haven't. No guilt. No. And that's it. So slavery isn't that picture. Slavery is this system. It's a system by which you lose all rights to contract. Yeah, you'll become an asset. You're already an asset under this Schismogenesis Trust. You give up your position of beneficiary. Yeah, you're on a ship, in a dock, dry dock, albeit, but you're still being dealt with as a slave. Ooh, you know, can we get that stuff into our heads? And so incel, just get it in your head. It's actually a system that they've used. Not called incel, but they've used this kind of mechanism for the IRA. They've also used it and still use it for Islamic terrorists. So if you have ever shown any interest in that Islamic terrorism, you've already been bagged by this system. Although, of course, it's not in relation to being celibate. But they're saying it is a path to it. You know what I'm saying? So maybe I'd better start looking to get laid quick in case I'm on this. Anyway. But incel. Now then, what else did I have I wanted to show you? Oh yeah. It's on my notes. And it is. So let's go back to this. What is going on with all this hoo-ha in the Ukraine? So what did I do? Oh yeah, I've got to go through it. So now then, so here is our little, so all right, Now then, now I'm getting it. I'm getting it now, folks. Now I'm getting it. So here you go. Why is everybody wanting to hate Russia? Why? Well, this guy here despised Russia. I mean, he's dead now. But this guy was a serious influencer of quite a few presidents of the United States. And it's his vigour, you might say, that has kept the Let's Hate the Russians alive through a lot of the US presidencies. And he's Zbigniew Brzezinski. So if I'll have to go back onto this. It says, Zbigniew Brzezinski, in full, Zbigniew Kazimierz Brzezinski, born March 28, 1928, Warsaw, Poland, and died May 26, 2017, Falls Church, Virginia. US international relations scholar and national security advisor in the administration of President Jimmy Carter, who played key roles in negotiating the SALT II nuclear weapons treaty between the United States and the Soviet Union, and in the US. So he pretty much was behind the negotiations between the United States and the Soviet Union. And it was the efforts were to sustain the rule of Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran. So this is where all the nonsense that went on with the Shah, who, back in his day, although he was a British imperialist to begin with, once he became the Shah, recognised the value of the mineral wealth that Iran holds and started to get rid of the claws that were into it from the British Empire and other aspects of the empire, and started to decide that move to, have his country benefit from its natural resources. This is why the Shah were removed and the Ayatollah put in. Because if you look at the pictures back in those days, Iran was actually no different to any European city. In the cities, I don't know what it was like out there in the other parts, but in the cities, they were as Western as you'd expect in Europe. Which you could expect, given it's the home of the Aryans. So there we go. So this guy, very important, and this goes back as far as Jimmy Carter. It says Brzezinski's father was a prominent member of the Polish government who was appointed ambassador to Canada in 1938. When Soviet-backed communists took over the Polish government in 1945, the Brzezinski family was stranded in Canada. After this event, Brzezinski harboured a deep opposition to communism and the Soviet Union. And of course, they do carry on as though Russia today is the Soviet Union. Well, is it? I don't think it is. There's probably more freedom in Russia these days than there is here in the West. Now, you might think that's a bit of a long call, but it isn't, actually. You can do pretty much everything you used to be able to do here in Russia today that we lost through the 80s, It's not as we perceive it. The Soviet Union, it expanded its grip in Europe after World War II, right across Europe, and put an Iron Curtain up, and then programmed that population. So when the wall came up, you still got two sides. You know what I'm saying? You got the Western Germans, Poles, right through, and then those that have been programmed from the Eastern side. So a real division, and it half, basically, you could say, Europe's landmass and thus population for all the time that the Soviet Union was in place. But the Soviet Union moved into China. It moved into here. That's why we had all the socialist movements after World War II here, because they'd come here. They went into America. So the Bolshevism went far and wide after they took over Russia, and moved the same system into China at the backside of everything. So is Russia today still operating under the Soviet Union? Now, its intelligence structures could well be. But But if they are, they're being done in the same way the West does it, which is pretending the beneficial when they're not. They're working for the corporation. They're not working for us. You know, the intelligence originally of the East India companies. You know, so they're not working for you. Never have. And if you've joined it, you're not working for your nation. So Brzezinski studied economics and political science at McGill University in Montreal in 1948, and political science at McGill MA in 1950. And at Harvard University, PhD in 1953. He was later, 53 to 60, an instructor and assistant professor of government at Harvard and research fellow and research associate of Harvard's Russian Research Center, later the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies, and its Center for International Affairs, later the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs. He was an associate professor of public law and government at Columbia University from 1960 to 62, when he became the first director of Columbia's Research Institute on Communist Affairs, later the Research Institute on International Change, a position he held until 1977. During the 60s, he was also a foreign affairs advisor to Presidents John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson, while serving as the first director, 73 to 76, of the Trilateral Commission. Brzezinski met Jimmy Carter, who was then the Democratic governor of Georgia, and acted as Carter's foreign affairs advisor during his successful presidential campaign. Brzezinski served as national security advisor in the Carter administration, 77 to 81. Afterward, he resumed teaching at Columbia from 81 to 89, and then served from 1989 as senior research professor of international relations at the Paul H. Nitz School of Advanced International Studies at the Johns Hopkins University. So this hatred for Russia, and of course, there are papers out there that suggest that he was actually the one behind this Cuba crisis that Kennedy had to deal with, and had it been Johnson in instead of Kennedy, then it would have kicked off as a nuclear situation then. So he's been, this guy's been influential in all the colleges. So, any of your offspring in America that have been going for these degrees, whether you can become a diplomat in one way or another, have all had their head twisted by this geezer, which is interesting. The Carter foreign policy team achieved several major successes, in addition to playing a role in negotiating the SALT II treaty, which Carter withdrew from US Senate consideration following the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979. Brzezinski helped Carter renegotiate the Panama Canal Treaty, ratified in 1978, and prepare for the eventual transfer of authority over the canal to Panama. In addition, Brzezinski worked assiduously on improving US relations with China. Under his guidance, the United States opened its first official embassy in the Chinese capital since the communists assumed power in 1949. Now that's interesting, considering Brzezinski is supposed to be a man that hates communism. Yeah? So in essence, you can look at these guys and what they bring is, they get you scared shitless of communism, and then they suggest all the people that you should put in your polite parties, your departments, etc. And basically what he does is fill whatever it is you're involved in with his own people. Can you see how this works? So this is what John Coleman were telling me were happening with MI6. That this is how they do it. MI6 was actually installing communist regimes all over the world, which is why he started to keep his paperwork and then wrote his books. So this is classic stuff. So Brzezinski hates communism, everybody trusts him, and whoever he suggests that you take influence from, you go for finance from, or whatever, they're supplying. This is the mafia. This is the Kazakh mafia again. You know what I'm saying? They're clever bastards, these lot. So he sort of brokered closer ties between the United States and China, or the corporation China, let's not forget. Brzezinski's tenure as National Security Advisor was marked by his public disputes with the State Department. Friction between Brzezinski and Secretary of State Cyrus Vance began during the negotiations over the SALT II treaty. Both Carter and Brzezinski sought to radically expand the scope of the treaty by proposing that the Soviet Union drastically limit the number of its intercontinental ballistic missiles in exchange for limits on US cruise missiles. However, Vance was not informed of this offer until he joined the negotiations. When the Soviets initially refused, Vance was publicly embarrassed. So Vance was probably a bit more of an American guy. And obviously, Brzezinski's job was to get rid of these people and put in the political guys that the name of which cannot be spoken. Yeah? A bit like Eric Bekoff acted in our politics, especially in controlling UKIP and the Conservative Party, now gone. But this was another, he was a Russian guy tied into the place that cannot be mentioned. And he made a hell of a mess of... he basically ensured that the Eurosceptics from the 80s that were causing havoc for Thatcher and all future Conservative parties came to naught. It began with Goldsmith, you know, but Eric Bekoff was the man behind all that. And in his main influence that we were aware of was with UKIP. Came as quite a shock when I realised, as David Cameron announced, that without this guy, Eric Bekoff, Cameron's Tory party would not exist. And that was in his 2010 conference speech. So have a look. He said, in 1979, Brzezinski made his greatest mistake when he advocated steadfast US support for the Shah of Iran. Although American intelligence had questioned whether the Shah could retain power during the Iranian Revolution, which was set up by the CIA, which is Jesuits, which is Prussians. Remember, when we talk about Jesuits today, and as of the end of the 1700s, we are foolish if we see them as anything to do with Rome, because they weren't. They were taken, you know, they were thrown out of the Vatican system and pushed and took up by the Prussians. So from the late 1790s, the term Jesuit is synonymous with the Prussians, and that's an hard one to shift it in your subconscious to get away from what we all have just gone along with all these years. Not the case at all. So, you know, the Iranian Revolution was basically created by the Prussians through the Jesuits. So Brzezinski's tied in to this as well. Brzezinski persuaded Carter to reject the revolutionary's demands. Consequently, when the revolution succeeded, the United States had no contact with Iran's new religious leaders, a situation that severely limited the diplomatic options available to the United States during the Iran hostage crisis, and that was between 79 and 81. The perception that Carter had mishandled the crisis strongly contributed to his defeat in the 1980 presidential election. But who got in there? That were Reagan, wasn't it? Again, Brzezinski had his ear, you know. So the Brzezinski has had the ear of a lot more than you think, in the same way that George Herbert Walker Bush had power through the Reagan administration as well, which is odd because you would have seen Bush and Brzezinski as opposites, but that's only for the public consumption, you know. The perception that Carter had mishandled the crisis strongly to his defeat. Brzezinski's many books include Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era, and that were in 1970, in which he predicted that the United States and the Soviet Union would eventually confront each other in the developing world in a battle over natural resources. The grand failure, the birth and death of communism in the 20th century in 1989, and then the choice, which were called global domination or global leadership, 2004, and strategic vision, America and the crisis of global power, which he put together in 2012. So, AFRICOM, that was set up all across Africa, was in Brzezinski's eyes the means to pitting the Russians and the United States against each other as proxy wars. Now, they probably did that, but of course, the new kid on the block, China, has made huge advances in Africa over the 20 years as well, and probably spoilt the party. But then I'm not in for a second believing that this was not just another path to carry out if what they were doing didn't work out. So, well, we don't need to go through his MO, because I wanted to go to something else actually, just to further sort of just expound. Oh, right, of course. Now, Trilateral Commission. Organisation of private citizens founded in 1973 principally by American banker David Rockefeller to confront challenges posed by the growing independence of the United States and its principal allies, Canada, Japan and the countries of Western Europe, and to encourage greater cooperation between them. So, this is David Rockefeller, yeah, Trilateral Commission, a satellite of the Round Table, you know, and this is an organisation of private citizens. This is why it's all trusts, you know. This is all being done, the foundations, all that garbage, where the power is being transferred to. It's all in the private, and they're robbing the public purse, and they have been for a very long time. The Trilateral Commission is headed by 3 regional chairs for Europe, North America and Asia Pacific region, who are assisted by several deputies and an executive committee. Now, why this is important is because Brzezinski is a schley of David Rockefeller. So Trilateral Commission is headed by 3 regional chairs for Europe, North America and the Asia Pacific region, who are assisted by several deputies and an executive committee. The entire membership meets annually, the location rotating among the 3 regions, to consider reports and debate strategy. Regional and national meetings are held throughout the year. Regional headquarters are in Paris, Washington DC and Tokyo. Probably being because the main organisation that runs these is the Royal Institute for International Affairs, or the RIIA, which is what's it called? Chatham House. An extremely powerful piece of kit running this, involving this round table. And as we mentioned last week, pilgrims. We'll come to them in another live stream because they're extremely important and very powerful. The Trilateral Commission's principles of representation are economic weight and political influence and are reflected in the varying membership quotas assigned to each country. The Trilateral Commission reflects powerful commercial and political interests committed to private enterprise. Yeah, so everything they do is powerful commercial and political interests committing political interests to private enterprise and stronger collective management of global problems. Yeah, so management, everything's managed through the UN and these bodies. So, these are the think tanks that are behind the United Nations policy, and and it's all ultimately coming from the banks, the central banks. Its members, more than 400 in the early 21st century, are influential politicians, banking and business executives, media, civic and intellectual leaders, and a few trade union chiefs. Membership is by invitation only. So they've bagged it, everything. Trilateral Commission's agendas have anticipated those of the Group of 7, the G7, and the Group of 8, the G8 summit meetings between the leaders of the world's largest economies. Yeah, so, this is what they're manipulating. Members have held key positions in US administrations and in the governments of other member countries. In the late 1970s, for example, many former Trilateral Commission members held senior positions in the cabinet of US President Jimmy Carter. Yeah, so can you see Brzezinski? This is what we're looking at, yeah? And they had shitloads of trilateral members in the cabinet of Jimmy Carter. Yeah, so Brzezinski, you trust him? Oh, it's alright, you can't trust him. He gets rid of all the Americans and say, yeah, you get this guy in. You know what I'm saying? And you get the mafia boy in, the smiley boys, the big suits, blah de blah. You know what I'm saying. In 2001, the Trilateral Commission expanded its membership to incorporate economically smaller but emerging countries within its regional structure. For example, Mexico was accorded a handful of members, as were Asia-Pacific countries such as Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, New Zealand, the Philippines, Singapore, South Korea and Thailand. China and India were first admitted in 2009. So can you see, these are the organisations that are running these nations, these governments. And look at what they're doing. Now they're pretending not to be hating each other. The best mates, you know? The best mates. And Putin is not doing anything other than the next phase in the charade. I told you the Fruitbats have been out this week. You know what I'm saying? So that's that. Hang on. Right, I don't want to... Because I had some other ones that where did I put them? Yeah, that's going to be fun, isn't it? They seem to be pretty crap. I'm finding them. Should have put more in. No, I don't bloody know. I'm getting thick. So I'll tell you what, I'll just bang it over here. I'm on here. So that's Brzezinski, and he has been the main mover of let's everybody hate Russia. Alright, so they're all operating to that Trilateral Commission, which is Royal Institute for International Affairs. It's the Round Table, it's the CFR, you know, it's the Club of Rome, which runs the environment stuff. It's the United Nations as well, you know. It's all these satellites of the Round Table. I think that David Icke put that out many, many moons ago, but I think he got it off Coleman. John Coleman did a lot of stuff, and you know, it's surprised. I can't believe he's just disappeared into the mists. Let's have a look. Right, just let me find your inside joke shot, single white male. Yeah, it's ridiculous, to be honest, because, you know, these things are dangerous, and these are the things in the background that they're compiling files on people. You know what I'm saying? So just being a single white male, now, if your internet behaviour is suggesting that you're desperate, you know what I'm saying? That's... And then terrorism. So they can, if they in the... See, this is all going on in the background. If they in the background create this file, tie you to this incel, then terrorism labels there as well, isn't it? Are you with me? And this is all going on in the background. You get arrested on that, whew, you're away. You're away. It's dangerous stuff. And I've been going on about this terrorism thing for yonks that people really don't understand what it is. Yeah, we did refer to him as master or squire. They always used to call you squire a lot of thousands. Alright, squire. Up here. Short treasures. Lost at sea. No, but you can claim it now. And you can cash it in at your maturity, at your oh, wait a minute, I've got a terrible picture on my thing, haven't I? Sorry guys, let me go back to that and just sort my shit out. My apologies. See, this is where I'm not savvy with everything proper. Right, hopefully you're seeing that. Because this is expanding the script that these Johnny Come Latelys and the Fruitbats coming off them that we've been going apeshit for the last 2 weeks. This is the script that they're working to. Okay. So, says, this is US Army War College Quarterly Parameters. And this is in winter 2018. Social media warriors leveraging a new battle space. Budhika B. Jayamaya and Jahara Matisek. And that's the two amigos. Okay. Coercion. New means and methods. Social media warriors leveraging a new battle space. As we said, so it says abstract. This article explains modern efforts to create a new battle space within civil societies of Western countries. Not Eastern countries, Western countries. This battle space consists of the internet, social media, and other technologies that can be used to foment social and political discontent. The article includes recommendations for countering such efforts. Civil society presents a fundamental blind spot in the American military understanding of warfare, long associated by philosophers as a bulwark against tyranny. In liberal democracies, civil society has been weaponized by hostile actors such as Russia and China. And of course, they are being controlled by the place that cannot be mentioned, whether that be the one that we're all aware of or the secret one over there on the other side at Russia. The adversary strategy involves infiltrating Western civil society in order to foment dissent and create breaches along ethnic, racial, religious, and socio-economic lines. These actions generate and intensify hyper-partisanship on both sides of the political spectrum for the purpose of deepening social divisions. Such new tactics differ from their historical antecedents, in which hostile adversaries, or Cold War communist states, supported one side of Western civil society, the left-wing political movements, in the hopes of shifting political attitudes. So there you go. You've got it. There's the whole idea of social system, is communist. However, as John Coleman lets us know, we haven't to be deluded that this just belongs to Russia. This is what MI6 was shoving in all the nations that they were in throughout the last couple of 100 years. The new tactics create ideological, sympathetic individuals who desire policy change that align with the adversary's state's ideology or that promote detrimental and self-destructive views. These views, in turn, can undermine social cohesion while disrupting foreign policy choices. This approach accentuates attacks on Western civil society across multiple dimensions by using social media warriors who indirectly receive orders from and are secretly paid by Moscow, Beijing, and other Western adversaries. But it's not, is it? It's MI6 as well. It's CIA as well. But in the picture they want you to see that it's only coming out of two places. It is coming out of both of those places, but through what people believe to be their own intelligence services, and they're not. This approach is centered. The social media warriors and their handlers regard the internet as an unguarded, under-surveilled, and ill-defined human-to-human interface that can be easily manipulated. Subsequently, social media forums such as Facebook and Twitter become a battle space of ideas, injected with disinformation in hopes of influencing individual societal and political behaviour. So when you all jump on this Ukraine flag, and with Ukraine, and we probably should put underneath, I don't know where it is. This is what you're playing into. This is the shit that gets put out in there. So if you're not savvy with how the alternative media works, it's full of garbage. It's full of it. It really is full of it. And that's what this is all about. And then you go off into your feedback loop. That's what's happening now. I went to a funeral on Friday. And as we went to the pub after, obviously you're saying a lot to people that are there that you don't know. And there's one guy there, dark glasses, and I thought, oh yeah, we know what you're into. And I said, how are you? All right, shook his hand, and he's giving, oh yeah, I'm not like them in Ukraine. And I just thought, whoa, fella, shut the fuck up. Do I look like I give a fuck? I'm at a funeral. And I just thought, go away. But he was there to push that into everybody's conversations in there. So he didn't come near me again after that. So this is what I'm saying about the loop. Once you believe in something, you stop listening to anything else. And as the further you go, when you're watching the media, believing the bullshit, that loop reinforces itself. And you are stuck. You're stuck. And then the other side of them in the same mode. Stuck. Reinforcing. Not listening to this side. Watching TV. Because when you watch TV, you get both. You get data for that loop. You get data for that loop. If you're going on if you're a bit unsure and you're going in alternative media, you're still getting pushed into one loop or the other loop. You know what I'm saying? Because they're presenting it as you must feel sorry for. One's a victim, one's a perpetrator. No, they're being controlled. The perpetrators are the people in each country that have allowed these governments to do what they're doing. So we are involved. It is us. We are allowing it. We can't keep this, oh, it's not to do with me, Gov, when you go out voting. You know what I'm saying? When you know, that's not how reality works. That's how La Land works. You know what I'm saying? It's not how the game works. Just La Land. So, as a consequence, the discourse of Western civil society is shaped in ways fundamentally hostile to the effective functioning of pluralist liberal democracies. Yeah? So they shape it in such a way that you become hostile to your own system. Have they not achieved that to perfection? You damn right they have. In fact, we watched just happen in the last 2 years. A big portion of your own nation is the other portion. You know, the police hate everybody. You know? These judiciaries, they hate everybody. Not of their own. That's a division. That's this taking over the state and then attacking civil society. We did a video on that. So where does it say? Of pluralist liberal democracies, fermenting dissension by spreading divisive social media posts and polarising memes lead citizens in Western societies to like and to share the message as well as to advocate for the ideas, thus creating a destructive civil discourse. Yeah, so the discourse becomes destructive. You know, it's not a discourse, it's not a debate, it's arguing. You know, when you're talking to some people, they're not listening to what you're saying. You can see in the back of the mind coming up with an argument, and it's like, when that happens, as soon as you see that in somebody, just cease talking. It's a waste of time. You want to talk and communicate with people that are listening, and then you listen too. But, you know, the important part is, don't waste your energy if they're not listening. They're just arguers. In a homogeneous society such as Iceland, this type of campaign has less impact because the social differences are primarily economic. But in countries with a variety of cultural and historical cleavages, malicious civil discourse deepens existing divisions that make social relations more acrimonious. So look what you've got here in the way you've got Protestant, you've got Catholic. You know, you've got Labour, you've got Conservative, you've got Liberal. Like there's some different thing. They're all in the public space, but in the private, they're all the same, just in the same pot. And they're actors, and their job is to get you to join in the act. They want you to observe the act more than anything because you're paying for it. You know, you're paying for this in your taxes for this act. But then, on occasion, they need you to get involved, especially if they need your vote, because that's what keeps this primary school system going, you know. Disinformation tactics against civil societies in the United States and its Western allies are not particularly new. The novelty, however, is the use of free and open civil discourse, which is traditionally a Western strength, as the centre of socio-cultural strategy aimed at manipulating civil society into a new battle space. The first component of this strategy relies on the existence of the internet and the use of social media. With the internet as the medium, individuals conduct essential societal interactions through a variety of apps and platforms that provide instantaneous, uber-efficient daily social contacts without the boundaries that affected civil interaction during the 20th century. I.e., you had to go out, didn't you, to socialise. Anti-Western actors use these virtual networks to produce and to breed ideas degenerative to stable societal norms, which ultimately impact policy, debates and elections. So all this gender confusion, you know what I mean? That's been thrust in there because they know there's enough idiots out there, girls, that'll suck this up. They'll suck it up because the fantasists, they're stupid. You know, they're women. They're not females, they're women. And it's a perfect, divisive thing. And now, to the point, it's in politics. Political decisions are being made based on that garbage. The second component of this strategy involves the exploitation of the rules that govern pluralist liberal democracies. When an adversarial state recruits an informer, it is an act of espionage. But a private group providing material, ideational, that's a funny word, ideational, rhetorical and inspirational, support a community, industry, lobbying or religious group is squarely within the protected legacy of free speech. Well, look what's happening in America. All the churches are on board. They're all on board. You know, they're preaching all sorts of nonsense. In this manner, adversaries search for and capitalise on the weaknesses available to them. Many virulent Salafi jihadists preach Western destruction in Western capitals and large cosmopolitan cities, where their dialogue is legally protected. But such liberty is non-existent in their own tyrannical home regimes. Yeah, I mean, that's ridiculous. It's not ridiculous that they can't have their say, that's fine. But then I've watched them at Speaker's Corner. If there's an opposing view, then these Muslims get violent. Now, the police should be on them like a ton of bricks. Yeah, because they're then infringing on the very thing that they're taking the piss out of, basically. And they're doing it because they're told to do it to piss everybody off. That's what they're doing because they want the Muslims in one loop and the white honkies in another loop. And them loops are working. I mean, if the Islamist thinks he's going to have an easy time here with the game they're playing, there's going to come a point where they're going to have the biggest shock of their life. You know what I'm saying? Because it's not a secret. It's not a secret. It's just that I think Muslims don't see that. They think it's a secret and it's not. With statistics indicating public trust in the American government is near an all-time low and trending downward, the adversarial strategy of further breaching civil society and democratic processes seem to be effective. So when we're really pissed, when our governments are being told to do stupid things and nobody likes anything they're doing, that's again set up so they can shove this next load of shite in. And they use polls and statistics, and we were told not to use these in the 80s. We were warned by every single department of government that we should not take on the American system of polls and statistics and all that shite. And look where we are today. The last 2 years were built entirely on first gaining figures by persuading you to dance along and then misrepresenting the figures and hiding all the negative stuff. But it worked. It worked to treat, you know. So these systems that we're reading about have actually been implemented and work, and they're fully operational. In fact, a poll commissioned by the former President George W. Bush and former Vice President Joe Biden found 55% of respondents thought democracy was weak, and 68% believe it is getting weaker. Well, of course it is, because it's turning into a dictatorship. They're all pissing in the same pot, because they're all compromised and they're all being told what to do. The process of creating social rifts to expand existing divisions and to generate self-destructive behaviours was called Schismogenesis in 1935. The Office of Strategic Services, an institutional precursor to the Central Intelligence Agency, used this theory in the South Pacific during World War II. Now, we've covered this. To sow disunity among enemy fighters and to create schisms in communities supporters of Japanese rule. Likewise, the recent rise of extremist politics in the United States and in Western Europe provides growing evidence that schismogenesis appears to have been fueled by Russia and China, and numerous other hostile actors who can benefit from the cost-effective method of weakening the rules-based international order without directly confronting the West. No, bullshit. Bullshit with a capital B. You know, they're thrusting it on those two because they're Bolshevik connected. But that's because the West hasn't realised that the Bolsheviks, since this, I mean, the First and Second World Wars were all about this, getting this system spread everywhere. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what's happened. And MI6, MI5 are the movers of these communist regimes. So it's not Russia and China. It's people who are Bolsheviks, who believe in communism, in believing the New World Order. That's who they are. And they're everywhere. And they're telling all our MPs, all our councillors, what to do. They're governing all private enterprise because they're setting up the rules, the regulations, the costs, the fees, the taxes. Can you see that? Your stakeholder committees in your town, they're telling your council what to do, how much rates they have to charge, this, they're telling them that. They're the ones dictating how the council tax is being. You know, this is what's happening. The internet, formed by multiple layers of human-to-human and machine-to-machine interfaces that are neither malevolent nor benevolent, was intended to be self-governing. The permissible legal architecture guarantees individual and community freedoms, especially in liberal democracies that are easily exploitable by hybrid actors who face few mechanisms of enforcement. So, these shows that they've got in there, they can get away with doing anything because nobody's going to enforce against them, providing they're playing along. So Alex Jones, these kind of people, they do what they're told, and if they don't, they get it. Moreover, the ubiquity of connected devices and Western dependency on them makes it easier for adversarial powers to penetrate systems and create social media chaos. And then they come in with all the censorship, don't they? So then they start to remove the actual words that you need to use in order to describe what it is you're describing. They take them off the table and they say it's this, it's that, and it's this. You know what I'm saying? And they get away with it because people go, oh, why do you go, ugh? You should just go, yeah, kiss my ass. You know what I'm saying? And then show them where the error of the ways, of course. The value of freedom to liberal societies further complicates efforts to detect hostile attempts to create schismogenesis because recognising the activity requires substantial domestic surveillance. Well, they've got that going down, haven't they? 3 years into the conflict on the Donbass, for example, scholars in the Ukraine finally began to document the various ways in which Russia had achieved schismogenesis. You see, this is again another game play. The government that were put in the Ukraine in 2014 as the perpetrators of this schismogenesis, through the government, because it's connected to the political movement that cannot be spoken. It's what they are. It's who he is. The actor president, the comedian guy. I mean, if you haven't already seen some of these films of him, have a look. Because this guy is a proper, serious actor and a comedian. And you just get into the bit where he did that Netflix thing where a school teacher did a speech and everybody voted for him and he became president. Yeah, that's, telegraphing. This guy hasn't got a clue what's going on. You know what I'm saying? He's just there to act. And who's he been meeting this week? They've all been meeting the rabbis this week. But they're all supposed to be on different sides. Yeah? No. Come on. Exacerbating this challenge is the informational asymmetry between countries, which enables hybrid actors to exploit the knowledge of what America and Europe are in the context of the strengths and the weaknesses of their own countries. Because the average Western citizen has little knowledge of these factors, external adversaries can hire inexpensive part-time social media experts to insert polarising rhetoric into ongoing political, societal and cultural debates inside the West. Now, this is happening all the time in social media, so they'll set up these little groups. And then they're censoring you all the time. This is who these people are. Inexpensive, part-time social media experts. So they're the ones running these little groups. Like we have a few in I'm News and Chat. It's total garbage, you know what I'm saying? You can't say anything on there. Or they'll stop the comments, kick you off, blah, blah, blah. It's so ridiculous. The children running it, you know. It's supposed to be I'm News and Chat. But as long as it's not news, or you're only chatting a little bit, it's okay. If you start talking news and using big words that grown-ups use, they explode. You know what I'm saying? It's like that. Current conceptions of this kind of warfare typically focus on how hostile actors best combine kinetic and non-kinetic tactics to degrade US power and influence in various regions. I mean, they've got the Americans, you know, because of all these wars on guilt trip. Well, we need to stop that. We got set up. We need to recognise we got set up, laugh our tits off a bit, and stand true. You know what I'm saying? Get a grip. Wake up. Get your shit together. You know, get your admin going. Not fannying around. Get on point. And mean it. General Philip M. Breedlove recently expressed concern for the false narrative affecting the West. This is a step in the right direction, but it does not take into account the depth and severity of Schismogenesis, created with the intent of dismantling Western civil society. This oversight is because the West's adversaries rely on a strategy of socially embedding hostility into the political discourse, converting civil society from a constructive force into a destructive one. Well, that's a fact. I mean, it's like local politics. They're so pathetic, these people. The things they'll do to protect themselves is just beyond belief. And these are somebody's grandma, it's your auntie, you know what I mean? These people, you look at them and you think, oh, just middle class English. They're insane, these people. The amount of deception they're prepared to carry out and cover up. It's ridiculous. Other such organisations include industry lobbyists, civil rights organisations, ethnic, racial and religious-specific organisations, and environmental activist groups. Registered lobbyists, which can advance the interests of the foreign government, can range from the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee to lesser-known groups that work on behalf of actors such as India, Armenia and Kurdistan. Other domestic lobbying groups promote national issues such as racial equality or prison reform, and some represent local organisations such as Neighbourhood Humane Society. So like here we've got Neighbourhood Watch, you know what I'm saying? You've got all that kind of nonsense. Yeah? This is what they did in Germany. You know, everybody's grassing on everybody else. It's called division. This is why you have to lock your doors up now. And, you know, I don't know. In this manner, negative and positive freedoms are balanced. Rights are not trampled on by either side of the political spectrum, and the two remain in constant contention. Communal organisations that constitute civil society are a necessary foundation for liberty and resisting the tyrannical tendencies of unchecked executive power. So community organisations is what keeps them in check, like our unions used to do it. Some organisations are goal-driven and as a consequence can utterly uncivil, profoundly illiberal and easily manipulated if the organisation objectives align with those of a patron or patrons. So again, these patrons of all these things are important. Yep. You know, ARC, we've discussed ARC, its ties with Epstein, Harvard, MIT, funding the science that created the last 2 years and blackmailing everybody and anybody that had power and has power and holding them in a tight grip. You know, that's the game. ARC. Who's the patron? Prince William. Are you saying? Did you hear that? You know, basically, it has to be on the same exact. The organisation, when you become a patron, the organisation will align with with those objectives of the patron. Can you see that? So it's not that he's there and doesn't know how to bet it. He's there because he knows exactly what it is. Yeah, you do. That's what it works like. Before the Nazi Party took control of Germany in the early 30s, the country was dense with civil society organisations and had more Nobel Prize winners than any other country in the world. Unfortunately, many civil society organisations, to include the Nazi movement, happened to be explicitly fascist or contained fascist sympathisers despite Germany being highly sophisticated and educated. So you can see this is an agenda, and the reason why we've got onto the Schismogenesis is because they're pushing this idea that it's mass psychosis. It's not. It's nothing to do with mass psychosis. It's the fact that they've achieved this division. You could also say they've created a form of autism in the populations through division, putting them on one side or the other, you know? And that's manipulatable. And now you've got it, they transferred a lot of the anger that's just been off this 2 years onto this Russia, creating a platform. They're going to just advance this climate thing now. Because now they've got all the reasons in the world to play with the fuel, gas, electric, shipping, so food. They're going hell for leather to destroy farming, meat. It's there. It's there for you to see if you would only look. That what these people have achieved, and they're pretty much just playing it out now like a violin, it is actually a very interesting read, if you can just see through where they're trying to focus. So in here, they're giving you information, and they knew they'd have to give you this information because it was going to come out. So they preempt it, they give you the information, but they're just diverting you slightly. And especially today, if you're reading this, you're going to jump all over this Russia-China, because of course we've got Russia kicking 10 bells out of a load of Ukrainians over there. So, alright, the militias of the Donbass are doing the fighting, and the Russians are there in backup with artillery and whatever else is required. So that's basically what we've been discussing in the hatred for Russia. It's been a long time building. The methods that they're using, and that you've got to bear in mind what we've just looked at, is the attacking Russia and China, but of course this is the intelligence agencies as a whole, the corporate state, as it were. That's what they're pushing everywhere, because they're taking it off you. They're monopolising everything. That's communism, yeah? And the state, the all-powerful state, is an all-powerful corporate state beholden to the bankrupt government, which is being administrated in bankruptcy by all these CFR, that we've just gone through, via the UN, on behalf of the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central bank for the central banks. So, that's that. Now, what else did I have? Let's have a look at you guys. Right, so when I was... Hey up. Hey up. Hey up, lad. It's going down. Found out a bit later, at 59. What have you found out, Jeff? A statutory decoration. We don't do decoration, dude. Oh my god, you got a lot more going on there. Right. Comes to you sleuthing on station deck also worth a visit. And Christopher Hauser is another guy who I want to get into, because he's very amenable, he's very pleasant in his delivery, and he's hiding nothing. He just gives it you. He's under UCC, so there's a lot of things that he's talking about that you couldn't follow in relation to the forums, etc. that he's using. But so many of the subjects that I've actually discussed, i.e. court of record, special appearance, all these terms that I've discussed and brought into the mix for you guys, this guy's using them as well, because it's like I've said before, you have a lot of diffractors out there that are just, they're giving it the big, you this, you that. Well, yeah, that's fine, you can think that, I don't actually give a shit, you know what I'm saying? If you're having success with what you're doing, carry on. That's fine. But this that I've learned this year is it's the way it works, the system. So Chris Hauser, very interesting. He's on YouTube. He started up November last year. Now I will say this: you don't have to go all in order, but go to the bottom video and watch that, because what he's doing there is showing you the end result, the effects of what he's done, and then all the videos after explain what gives you that standing. Okay, so that's how he's operating, and it's brilliant. You really want to get a look at that geezer. $32. I can honestly tell you guys, when I close these down in YouTube, I think there were 180 of you last week. You know, so well, obviously it's because I believe it's the rankings of your channel goes up if you're getting likes, if you're getting good comments. You know what I'm saying? If you're getting a lot of attention, your ranking goes up. So obviously, I think the strategy is they want to keep this channel at a low. But I don't mind really, because I'd rather have 32 people who are actually getting something from it than 14 million people that are just there for a toss, a bet and a laugh and get me to swear a lot. Because that's what they were doing at first. I mean, when I first sweared, they were all sending me emails going, "Oh yeah, fine, we need more swearing, do more swearing, you're hilarious." And I'm like, yeah, but Grandma doesn't like it. You know, Grandma doesn't like swearing. It's naughty. Right, I'm sure I had something else. Let's have a look. What time are we on? How long have we done? 1 hour 38. My God! Can gob off me, I'm telling you. Now then. So this. I've been meaning to do this for ages because I actually quite like this guy. And in the spirit of not judging people by their affiliations and their life, what they've lived, it's all about the fruits and what they're doing. I'm not really good at finding these. I should organise my browser. Here we go, a bit better, because I'm actually pretty shit. So, I've actually kept an eye on this guy, because this guy talks absolute sense. Absolute sense, and for me it's another pointer to show you that it doesn't matter who you are in our West, as it were. You know what I mean? Because all of us together have lived in this system that's being destroyed. And obviously for a long time the power in that system was Rome. And this guy is, what's he called? Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano. This guy's good. Now, bless him, he's obviously reading a lot of stuff in alternative, and he's just getting a bit carried away on some points. But I get what he's saying, and he's saying, can you see this, by the way? No, you can't. You can't in the video. So, there we go. You can see that there. So he's saying what I'm saying, which is that regardless of what your religious connotation, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. Once you recognise that our West that we've enjoyed and that we want back, we're all crying about it, we're built in this, whether we like it or not. It's the fact that this has been took over that we're in a mess, okay? That's the problem. All our positions of power now are under this new system. So he has to say, seeking to find any coherence of the recent action of the Society of Jesus with the original intentions of St. Ignatius of Loyola is an arduous, if not impossible task, to the point that in hindsight one considers the reconstitution of the order in 1814 after its suppression by Clement XIV in 1773 to have been ill-advised. So there you can see recognition that, you know, these Jesuits are not the same Jesuits, the Prussian Jesuits, whatever that is, yeah, which is the military running all this nonsense. It is not surprising that, in the process of dissolution and self-demolition to which the entire ecclesiastical body is subjected, the contribution of the Jesuits has been and still remains decisive. It is no coincidence that since 2013, even the highest throne has been occupied by a Jesuit, Georgi Mario Bergoglio. Even though this is in violation of the Ignatian rule that forbids members of the Society of Jesus to take up positions in the hierarchy. But again, cementing, the Jesuits after 1773, reinstated 1814, are not the same. They're not the same. And people really need to get that in your heads, because there's so many guys out there who've done copious amounts of works on the Jesuits. They never, ever acknowledge this fact, this reality. And so, shit's getting aimed off the centre. You know what I'm saying? And you get what I'm saying. In the international geopolitical context of the role of Italy, may appear in some ways marginal, but in reality, Italy is a testing ground for the experiments of social engineering that the globalist agenda intends to extend to all governments over the span of the next 10 years, both in the economic and political sphere as well as in the religious one. So that's interesting. You know, people that are running around hating Italians in Italy, you know, it's ridiculous. You know what I mean? It's ridiculous. As he's saying, they bear brunt of it at the beginning. It's therefore understandable why La Civiltà Cattolica and its omnipresence director, is that Friar or Father? Antonio, is that Friar or Father? It'd be Friar, that, isn't it? Antonio Spadoro, SJ, have spent themselves in decomposed endorsements, both of the Italian and global left, including the Democratic Party in America and the Communist Party in China. Yeah? Can you see that? There you go. He's showing you China, Communist Party. A big chunk of this bunch are in there, which is correct. The Jesuits were shoved into China very early. And in truth, when I've studied China and its history, they were very well respected, the original Jesuits. So this is pre-kick-out time. Yeah? They were very well respected and highly regarded in China and welcomed, unlike the British Empire. Yeah? And that stood out a mile throughout all the studies of China. You know, things are not what people seem. Everything's changed. In the international I've done that. On the other hand, the ideological closeness of the Society of Jesus to left-wing revolutionary movements dates back to the first symptoms of 1968, which Vatican II laid the ideological foundations for, and which found their greatest expression in the theology of liberation, which is the Jesuit game. After having removed the condemnation of communism from the preparatory documents of the council. Yeah? So they removed, when they were having this council, the condemnation of the communism was removed. So Vatican II is a Jesuit thesis, and that is what changed Rome to everything we hate about it now. Yeah? What they hated about it before were nothing to do with this. It was because they'd gone stupid and they were offering forgiveness of sins if you give them cash and such. You know what I'm saying? So the hatred before wasn't this hatred. This is handsome. You know what I'm saying? This is handsome with this bunch of shit. So Vatican II basically is the foundation for communism. and all condemnation of communism was took out of the preparatory documents for this Second Vatican Council. It is significant that many of the protagonists of that unfortunate season in Latin America, after the indulgence and moderate sanctions imposed by the Holy See in recent decades, have been rehabilitated and promoted by the Argentine Jesuit. So basically, a lot of South Americans refuted Vatican II because the Catholic Church itself refuted Vatican II. Yeah, and that's obviously what the South Americans, being later sort of tie into Rome, were not having it. They weren't having it. But obviously saying that the Jesuits in Argentina have spent a hell of a lot of time to invert that position, where today they've got that. So of course, who controls Argentina? Who persuaded Argentina to invade Falklands? Who's now backing Argentina's claim to the Falklands? You know what I'm saying? Here comes the new system. So then we can safely say that Vatican II was the beginnings of the no-hide system in Rome. Seeing Prodi and Gentiloni, who I don't know who these are, two former Italian prime ministers, together with Father Spadaro, for the presentation of the essay Nel Anima della Sina, in the Soul of China, here should not surprise anyone. They are the expression of the deplorable adult Catholicism that ignores the necessary consistency of Catholics in politics desired by John Paul II and Benedict XVI. Now, though Paul, I didn't like Pope John Paul II, but I think Benedict, because I read a lot of his stuff, that guy was alright. I quite liked him. Now, I know he got bagged with all the paedophilia stuff, but you know what I mean? It's like, what I'm saying is people have lost interest in the fact that Rome is what gave us what we had, albeit, you know, it being naughty all the time as well. But, you know, we explored why paedophilia entered the church, and that comes off Sabotage Zevis through Jacob Frank's influence in Catholicism, which was to do sin, to bring in the Messiah. So that involved incest, child abuse, and everything sinful. You know, you do sinful to bring in the Messiah. And we've explored that. So you can see that a lot of what I've been saying all these years on this game, in my websites, in my videos, in this last couple of years, is showing themselves as reality. Do you know what I'm saying? We're that busy attacking our own systems, attacking our own people. You know what I'm saying? Hatred's just been created out of nothing. Is it any wonder there is no nation? There is nobody living the national laws, the constitution, the ideology, the culture. It's just not being upheld. And the same in Rome. It's not being upheld because this system's been in since the 60s. So he's basically giving you there, just letting you know. Oh, hang on a minute here, got a bit more. We might need to just read this actually. A bit. Prodi and Gentiloni in Italy, and we would also add Premier Conte, given to his origin and his education, have their counterparts on the American side in the so-called Catholic personalities like Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Andrew Cuomo. All of them proudly support abortion and gender indoctrination, and all of them are proudly in favour of the Antifa and Black Lives Matter movements that do, setting entire American cities on fire. Schismogenesis. Discord, putting discord in that doesn't exist, then it exists. He's giving it you from an altar, by golly, you know. So it's known, this stuff's known, and it's known by everybody, whether they're religious or not. You just got to educate yourself to it. An equitable and honest analysis of the international sponsors of these parties, these spontaneous movements, and Catholic progressivism reveals a disturbing common thread running through all of these so-called philanthropists who manipulate the political and economic fortunes of the planet with enormous funding. In recent days, it's been reported in the news that the Jesuits in America have received grants of nearly $2 million over 4 years from George Soros And it seems that the same agreement between the Holy See and the Chinese Communist regime has been financed by large annual donations from Beijing to the Vatican coffers that are in a disastrous state. The fact that the church fell prostrate before the lockdown, suspending liturgical celebrations and closing churches all over the world, has led to considerable collateral economic damage, for which Chinese donations and the lucrative business of welcoming immigrants represent an obvious compensation. Can you see? The United States is witnessing the highest levels and centres of cultural influence of the American Catholic Church, shamelessly siding in favour of the Democratic candidate, and more generally in favour of the entire apparatus that has been consolidating in recent decades with the public administration. The deep state, Trump's sworn enemy, this is where I said he might not actually understand everything, but you see, I wonder if it's possible that there is actually a division in Israel and in Catholicism. I don't know, I've been thinking about that lately, to be honest, although Trump's cocked it up a bit today with breaking the greatest strategy the West has ever come up with, which was to put flags on our planes, bomb Russia and blame China and sit back and watch them have it. You know what I'm saying? It's like he's burst the bubble. Because that must have been the master plan, I would suggest, of the primary school children at Childcare Westminster and Washington DC. Anyway, who knows? The deep state, Trump's sworn enemy, is joined by a deep church that spurs no criticism and accusations against the incumbent president, while winking indecorously with Biden and BLM, slavishly following the narration imposed by the mainstream. It matters little that Trump is openly pro-life and defends the non-negotiable principles of the Democrats that the Democrats have renounced. The important thing is to transform the Catholic Church into a spiritual arm of the New World Order, so as to have an imprimatur from the highest moral authority in the world, something that was impossible with Benedict XVI. Agreed. It's like I said, he got a bad press in because obviously the culmination of all the nonsense came under his watch, but I actually studied some of his works, and I actually studied back in the day the head of the Jesuits as he came in. I think he was called Alfonso. Wow, if you ever read what he wrote, you'd be moved. You know, people run about with his Jesuit blood oath. You know, somebody actually spoke to him after he'd done a. So these guys had gone in there hating him because they had this Jesuit. Well, they were going blah blah blah. They actually sat there and listened to his speech, were absolutely blown away by it. And when they showed him this and asked him his opinion, you could tell he'd never even seen it. So, you know what I'm saying? It's like we have to start to recognise that this is a force that's took over everything. We don't really want to be considering that everything then that they're a part of has gone bad. Which is why we're on about maybe perhaps there was some movement in Whitehall that we should be looking at, but it's not looking like that's the case, to be quite honest. So maybe that was just a bit of pie in the sky. Where am I up to? Secretary of State Pompeo did well to censure the renewal of the secret agreement signed between Bergoglio and Xi Jinping. His lucid denunciation brings to light the aberrant Vatican attitude, the betrayal of the mission of the Church, the abandonment of the Chinese Catholic community out of sinister political calculation, and the way it is in accord with the aligned thought. Nor is it the piqued reaction of the Jesuits and Catholic progressivism surprising, beginning with Avvenire, the daily newspaper of the Italian Episcopal Conference. If Bergoglio can affirm with impunity that Trump is not Christian, evoking the ghosts of Nazism and populism, why would the US Secretary of State not have the right to express his opinion, with the more than legitimate objective of international security, about the connivance of the Holy See with the communist dictatorship that is more ferocious but also more powerful and influential than ever? Why does the Vatican, which is silent in the face of the Democratic Party's support for abortion and the violation of the most basic human rights in China, consider the Trump administration to have no right to interfere in an agreement that has obvious repercussions in the international political balance? Now I wrote something on this Vatican connection, and it looked like it was suggesting that they pretty much handed a lot of power of the Vatican over to China, like the choosing of bishops and all these kind of things, and it was rather worrying. It is on my website. I may put it under this this video. It causes just as much astonishment to see that the parrhesia in political confrontation that is called for in words is contradicted in fact by those who see their wicked plans brought to light. So that's the rhetoric versus the action. And it's unclear why an agreement presented as absolutely transparent and devoid of any obscure points has been kept secret and cannot be read even by the well-deserving Chinese Cardinal Joseph Sen. On the other hand, if we consider that among the people who dealt with the drafting of the agreement between the Holy See and the Chinese Communist Party, there was then Cardinal McGarrick, who was sent by Bergoglio on his behalf. So here's a link. We will understand the reason that the acts of the canonical process that led to the powerful prelate being reduced to the lay state remain shrouded in secrecy. In both cases, an operation of transparency and trust is urgent and necessary, because the honour and moral authority of the Catholic Church in the sight of the whole world is at stake. And yeah, I know what he means, because that's where all our titles are. That's where all our system is, and it's been undermined. And I think until we recognise that, all of us, not much is actually going to change, if you know what I mean. So, with that, what am I going to do here? So this is what we're going to look at, I think, next. Not tonight, because I think we've probably... but this, a very, very, very naughty bunch of people. A very, very powerful, massive, huge thing. And part of the British Empire. So, where are we? It's me again. Where are you at? No, I haven't seen that letter. Dream Turner. You wish you were my neighbour? Not sure about that. Actually, where I've just come from, yeah, I got on well. Great. I just don't talk this to people if I don't think they want it. To be honest, I have to fool most of the time. It's the only way to not get stuck into any conversations with most folk, because you can't. Because they have a fit, they trigger it, you go insane. Can you tell me the full name of that Chris guy? Hauser, Hauser. What? I can't put a link up on here, I can't do it. I'll put a link under this video for you if you don't find him. What I mean to say is they speak from the heart, my definition of preacher. Christopher Hauser, I think it's this guy trained. Oh God, somebody's giving it. Excellent. Yeah, that's him. He's brilliant. He come out at Nick. They obviously hammered him and he come out pissed off. And he spent 3 years in there learning. So, you know, listen to what he has to say. And like I said, he goes through a lot of terms that I've brought to your attention. So you can understand them all the more. But remember, he's working under UCC. So, not everything's applicable here. Getting control of the English. The English have been ridiculously pathetic since the end of the Second World War, mate. And I'll tell you, that's a fact. You know, I grew up on war films. That picture everybody has at Second World War ain't it. That's not how it went down. And they swoon at it. I've said this before, but unfortunately the baby boomers, in my opinion, are the most programmed generation I've ever studied in history. In many different countries. There's no getting to them. There's no getting into them at all. They're so used to easy life that they've forgotten that they have to take part. And that's been going on since the 1950s, you know, when they were coming of age, as it were, well, 50s, late 50s, 60s. And then they were obliterated with LSD. So they've been hammered, you know what I'm saying? It's not without reason that fell that way, but the LSD certainly didn't do well for the family unit, because they were all at it. Kids coming out everywhere, not belonging to who they were. It's like, what a mess. It completely and utterly annihilated the natural progression of family, line, blood, because they were all keeping secrets. Rather than just accept it and admit it, they were all lying, telling lies. So the entire baby boomer generation has imprisoned itself in its own lies and bullshit, which is why it can only copy what it's told to do without question. That's what I've witnessed with the baby boomers generation. Their whole lives are generally built on lies. You know, it's quite ridiculous. Mark Windows of Windows of the World did a good show on the Russian situation this evening, worth a listen. Well, I had somebody on the ground in Kiev. I were putting out what were coming directly out of Kiev and 8 other people around Ukraine who fed him. And I put it on Twitter. And I put it out before I ever saw any of it on Twitter. And then in a week, sure as hell, that's what then starting to be known. And it got to the point, and this is the last couple of weeks while this has been going on, I tweet, and there'd be a couple of hundred people on it within 5 minutes. So I'd say that was probably media. You know, because they're getting fed shit. You know, media's made up of people, journalists, you know, normal people. But the news is coming in from Reuters and AP, both controlled by the Rothschilds. Yeah? Editors are editing. I mean, back in the day when you worked for a newspaper, where you could investigate and put it out, and your editor would basically just speed reading it because they were looking to bring scoops and undermine wrongdoing. That's not been the case for a long time. Anybody, any reporter has to hand what he's putting together to the editor. And the editor's editing based on who's paying me money. Does that interconnect BMW? Does that interconnect Audi? Does that interconnect block? Out. You know what I'm saying? That's how it works. And it's been like that for a really long time. Which is why you only get pish and shit. And if you want to find the real journalists like that, you have to get out there and find them and find out where they're posting. Like, war correspondents, they're there, but you're not getting what they're posting. You need to find them. Subscribe to the piece, and you'll get daily updates on whatever's going on in that part of the world that they're in. On the ground, seeing it, you know. That's how I get my news. It's by looking for people who are in it, people that I trust, i.e. they're not selling a shit script. You know what I mean? And that's how I pull mine out. And headlines, I look for headlines a lot of the time. I don't really need to go into the story and look at the bullshit. But the headlines gives me a lot of news. You can see what's going on just by going through headlines. Anybody that learns anything from my research is welcome to it, and I'm happy that you're gaining something because that's what it's all about. That's why I do it. Cowboys and Indians, oh yeah, all the time. And I were an Indian. But then I were a cowboy as well because I would like John Wayne. You know what I'm saying? I would John Wayne sometimes. Mike Christopher, yeah, we know him. We know who he is. So folks, it's been, oh my word, we've gone past the 2-hour mark. Are you not bored yet? So I'm going to say thank you very much for coming. I think we might have improved some on this OBS. Hopefully we have, and we can continue to expand and make these live streams a bit more entertaining perhaps as well as getting down to some good old Shit. It's good to learn of secret societies. I could tell you quite a lot that I've never even mentioned. Maybe we shall one day, but symbolism, folks. That's what it's all about. Symbolism. So, with that, I will say, thanks for joining in. Till the next time.